Well, crocodiles are making a comeback in Florida after years of hunting and habitat destruction. Human-made canals are part of what's helping the crocs feel at home again.
The kings of the Florida Everglades are vanishing. Massive crocodiles, rulers of these swamps for millions of years, are disappearing or turning up dead, their territories abandoned and their bodies showing signs of violent attacks.
The crocodile attack. They found a man in his 20s who had suffered puncture wounds to his legs, back, and one of his hands.
Nothing in this ecosystem should be able to challenge them. Nothing. Except something no one expected. A predator that has crossed oceans and rewritten the rules of the swamp. What could strike fear into these apex hunters? And why has it arrived here, in America's most iconic wetlands? Tonight, we dive into an invasion that no one saw coming. A creature that has turned the apex of the Everglades into prey, and a mystery that will challenge everything you thought you knew about survival in this ancient landscape. The native kings. To understand why this discovery was so shocking, you first need to understand the battlefield. The Florida Everglades is not just a swamp. It is the largest subtropical wilderness in the United States, a vast river of grass that stretches across 1.5 million acres of slow-moving water, sawgrass prairies, and mangrove forests. It is one of the most unique ecosystems on the planet, home to creatures found nowhere else on Earth. And at the top of its food chain, two legendary reptiles have ruled for as long as anyone can remember. The first is the American alligator, the brute force enforcer of the swamp. These are powerful, adaptable animals that can thrive almost anywhere there is fresh water. They are the ones you see on postcards and warning signs, the reptiles that tourists come from around the world to photograph. Alligators are bold, territorial, and completely comfortable around humans.
I don't think I'd be here right now if this was just another guy with an alligator. Not that there's a whole lot of those out there. But there's a special bond between you two.
Very special.
They command respect openly and have earned their reputation as the face of Florida's wild places. The second ruler is less famous but equally important, the American crocodile. While alligators dominate the freshwater interior, crocodiles prefer the brackish and saltwater areas along the coast. They are the shy, cousins, the reclusive ones that want nothing to do with people. If you are lucky enough to spot an American crocodile in the wild, it will probably try to swim away from you before you can even reach for your camera. These animals have lived alongside humans in Florida for generations, and in all that time, there has never been a single confirmed fatal attack by an American crocodile on a human in the United States. Not one. They are gentle giants, content to stay in their lanes and avoid conflict. For millions of years, these two species shared the Everglades in relative peace. The alligators kept to the fresh water. The crocodiles stayed in the salt. They respected the boundaries that nature had drawn, and the system worked because every animal understood its place. That balance had been perfected over evolutionary timescales. It was stable, predictable, and safe. Then, in 2009, rangers started noticing that the rules were being broken and the kings of the swamp were suddenly looking over their shoulders. The vanishing. The first signs were easy to miss if you did not know what to look for. Airboat captains who had worked the same routes for decades began reporting that familiar animals were gone. These were not random crocodiles. These were the dominant individuals, the ones that had fought for and defended the best territories for years. Their basking spots, the prime real estate of the crocodile world, now sat empty. The animals that should have been guarding those locations had simply vanished. Then came the remains. Biologists started finding evidence of crocodiles and alligators that had met violent ends. These were not small juveniles that might have fallen prey to larger animals. These were full-grown rulers of the swamp, apex predators with no natural enemies. The manner of their deaths suggested something beyond normal predation. It looked like something was clearing the area with deliberate, overwhelming force. The breeding grounds that had been carefully protected for years.
This Nile crocodile is coming ashore for a very important event. Her babies are about to hatch.
The nurseries where generations of American crocodiles had been raised fell silent. Areas that should have been teeming with young juveniles were completely barren. The behavioral changes were even more disturbing than the disappearances. American crocodiles, animals famous for their shy and reclusive nature, started acting aggressively toward humans. Fishermen reported crocodiles snapping at their boats, chasing them through shallow water, displaying predatory boldness that had never been documented in this species before. To biologists, these reports made no sense. American crocodiles avoid conflict. They flee from threats. They do not chase boats. Something was fundamentally wrong, and the evidence pointed to an external force that was disrupting the entire ecosystem. Something was bullying the apex predators out of their own home. The wrong suspect. When the reports of missing and injured crocodiles started piling up, everyone suspected the same culprit. The Burmese python had become the undisputed boogeyman of the Everglades, an invasive species that had already devastated local mammal populations. These massive constrictors, which can grow over 20 feet long, had been eating everything in their path: raccoons, deer, even the occasional alligator. The python population had exploded and was spreading deeper into the mangrove forests, which happened to be the exact territory of the American crocodile. It seemed like an obvious conclusion. The snakes had finally grown big and ambitious enough to start targeting the swamp's rulers. The theory made sense on the surface. In 2005, a famous photograph had captured a Burmese python that had tried to swallow a 6-foot alligator whole.
They show the moment a python swallowed a crocodile whole. Look at that. Okay, so this crocodile, obviously larger than the snake.
The snake had literally burst open trying to consume its rival, creating an image that made headlines around the world. If pythons were willing to attack alligators, surely they would go after crocodiles too. As the python population expanded, it seemed inevitable that they would eventually win the turf war for the Everglades. Most people assumed that was exactly what was happening. But when biologists examined the evidence more carefully, the python theory fell apart. Pythons kill by constriction. They wrap their muscular bodies around their prey and squeeze until the victim suffocates. This method leaves distinctive marks: crushed bones, compression injuries, evidence of a prolonged struggle. The dead crocodiles showed none of these signs. Whatever was killing them was using a completely different method. The wounds suggested violent, direct attacks, not the slow suffocation of a constrictor. The pythons were not responsible. Something else was hunting the kings of the swamp. And if it was not the snakes, then the researchers had no idea what they were dealing with. The discovery. The turning point came when a team from the University of Florida's herpetology department captured a young crocodile near a densely populated urban area outside Miami. The location itself was suspicious. This was miles from any established American crocodile territory, far from the coastal mangroves where the species normally lives. When the researchers got a good look at the animal, they felt an immediate sense of unease. Something about this crocodile was wrong. It looked almost right, but not quite. Scientists describe this as the uncanny valley effect, when something appears familiar but has subtle differences that trigger an instinctive alarm. The snout was broader and more robust than a normal American crocodile. The coloration was darker, an olive black instead of the familiar grayish-green of the native species. But the most disturbing difference was behavioral. For a young animal, this crocodile was wildly aggressive. It displayed a predatory boldness that researchers had never seen even in fully grown native crocodiles. American crocodiles are shy. This animal was anything but. The team initially wondered if they had captured some kind of mutant or perhaps a hybrid that had crossbred with an alligator. Without clear answers, they sent tissue samples to a laboratory for DNA analysis. The results would take months to process. During that anxious waiting period, more reports of strange crocodiles came in from across southern Florida. Researchers observed that these mystery animals were growing an estimated 28% faster than native crocodiles of the same age. They were larger, more aggressive, and clearly thriving in an environment that should have been unfamiliar to them. Whatever these creatures were, they were not just surviving. They were outcompeting the animals that had ruled this ecosystem for millions of years. The identity. When the DNA results finally came back, the findings were worse than anyone had imagined. The strange crocodile was not a mutant. It was not a hybrid.
This is probably the strangest crocodile you've ever seen. The Indian gharial is a fish-eating species of crocodilian, catching fish with their slender jaws and sharp teeth.
The genetic analysis returned a perfect match for Crocodilus niloticus, the Nile crocodile. The aggressive animal that had been captured in a Miami canal was a member of a species native to Africa, found 6,000 miles from its natural habitat, thriving in the heart of the Florida Everglades. The implications were staggering. To understand why this discovery sent shockwaves through the biology community, you need to understand the difference between the two species. The American crocodile, as we have established, is a gentle, reclusive animal with 0 recorded human fatalities in the United States. The Nile crocodile is its polar opposite. Across its native Africa, the Nile crocodile is responsible for an estimated 200 to 300 human deaths every single year. Some estimates put the number even higher. This is not an animal that occasionally attacks humans when threatened. This is an indiscriminate man-eater, a predator whose biology is specifically adapted to hunt large mammals, including people. The physical differences are equally dramatic. American crocodiles typically reach lengths of about 13 feet and are considered large at that size. Nile crocodiles routinely grow to 18 feet and can weigh over a ton. Their bite force is among the strongest in the entire animal kingdom, powerful enough to crush bone and drag large prey underwater in an instant. These are the crocodiles that attack wildebeest crossing African rivers, the ones that have earned a reputation as one of the most dangerous animals on the planet. And now they were living in Florida, hiding in the same waters where families kayak and children swim. The Native American crocodiles were not dying from natural causes or python attacks. They were being outcompeted, displaced, and potentially preyed upon by a cousin from another continent, one that was stronger, faster, and exponentially more aggressive. The mystery of the vanishing kings had been solved, but the answer raised far more terrifying questions than it answered. How they got here, Nile crocodiles did not swim 6,000 miles across the Atlantic Ocean. They arrived by a much simpler and more disturbing route, the exotic pet trade. Florida has a massive, often unregulated black market for exotic animals. While Nile crocodiles are strictly illegal to possess without special high-security permits, reckless collectors treat these deadly predators as pets. They buy them as cute little hatchlings, keep them in tanks and backyard ponds, and then face an inevitable problem. A baby Nile crocodile grows into an 8-foot, 1,000-pound killing machine faster than most people realize. When the pet becomes unmanageable, the owners do not surrender it to authorities. They dump it in the nearest body of water and hope no one notices. Genetic testing on the captured Nile crocodiles revealed something chilling. They were not random individuals from different sources. They were genetically identical or closely related, meaning they all likely originated from a single group of hatchlings. The evidence pointed to one of two scenarios. Either the crocodiles escaped from a poorly secured private facility, or more probably, they were intentionally released by an owner who could no longer handle them. One person's carelessness or criminal negligence had introduced one of the world's deadliest predators into America's most vulnerable ecosystem. The terrifying reality is that this introduction did not happen recently. For the crocodiles to have established a breeding population, they must have been in Florida for years, possibly decades. They had been hiding in plain sight, successfully camouflaging among the Native American crocodiles due to their similar appearance. The subtle differences that troubled the research team, the darker coloration, the broader snout, the aggressive behavior, these were the only clues that something was wrong. And those clues had gone unnoticed for far too long. The perfect invasion. What makes this invasion particularly dangerous is how perfectly suited the Nile crocodile is to the Florida environment. The Everglades offer everything this species needs to thrive: warm temperatures, abundant water, and a buffet of prey animals. But unlike the Burmese python, which struggles in unusually cold winters, the Nile crocodile has a secret advantage. It can tolerate cold weather far better than its American cousin. In Africa, Nile crocodiles live in regions that experience significant temperature drops during certain seasons. They have adapted to survive conditions that would stress or kill other crocodilian species. This cold tolerance means the Nile crocodile is not limited to the southernmost tip of Florida. It can potentially expand its range northward into areas where the American crocodile could never survive. The threat is not contained. It is capable of spreading across an enormous geographic area, establishing populations wherever the conditions allow. And given the Nile crocodile's legendary adaptability, those conditions exist across much of the southeastern United States. The implications for native wildlife are catastrophic. The American crocodile was already struggling before its African cousin arrived. Decades of habitat destruction had pushed these animals into smaller and smaller corners of their historic range. Coastal mangroves, the natural homes of these crocodiles, have been bulldozed to make room for condominiums and hotels. The natural water flow of the Everglades has been redirected to serve agricultural demands, poisoning the remaining habitat with runoff from sugar farms and urban development. The native species was already fighting a losing battle against human encroachment. Now it faces a competitor that is bigger, faster, more aggressive, and better adapted to changing conditions. The Nile crocodile may deliver the final blow to a species that was already on the edge. The aftermath. The confirmation of Nile crocodiles in Florida triggered an immediate response from wildlife officials. The Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission and the University of Florida launched a joint mission to locate and capture every invasive crocodile before the breeding population could expand beyond control. The early results were both encouraging and terrifying. Teams managed to capture 3 confirmed Nile crocodiles, but the genetic evidence suggested there were more, possibly many more, still hiding in the vast waterways of the Everglades. The stakes of this hunt cannot be overstated. Even a single breeding pair of Nile crocodiles left uncaptured could produce dozens of offspring over their long lifespans. Each of those offspring could grow into an 18-foot apex predator with no fear of humans and a biological drive to hunt large mammals. The Everglades is a labyrinth of channels, marshes, and hidden waterways where a determined animal could evade detection for years. Finding every Nile crocodile in that environment is like searching for needles in a haystack the size of a small state. Officials began discussing scenarios that would have seemed absurd just a few years earlier. If the Nile crocodile population cannot be eradicated, Florida may have to fundamentally change how it manages its wild places. The warning signs that currently tell visitors to be cautious around alligators might have to be replaced with something far more serious. Warnings about active man-eaters. The Everglades, one of America's most beloved national parks, could be reclassified as a designated danger zone where visitors enter at their own risk. The entire relationship between Floridians and their wild spaces hangs in the balance. The real monster. When you step back and look at the full picture of this invasion, a disturbing pattern emerges. The Nile crocodile is a symptom, not a cause. It is a weapon wielded by the true invasive species, the one that has done more damage to the Florida Everglades than any reptile ever could. That species is us. Almost every biological disaster in Florida's history has human fingerprints all over the crime scene. The Burmese python epidemic exists because someone thought a giant constrictor would make an interesting pet. The green iguana invasion happened the same way. And now, one of Africa's deadliest predators is establishing itself in American waters because someone decided they wanted to own an exotic crocodile. The black market for exotic animals is a massive industry that operates in the shadows, and the Everglades has become its dumping ground. Dealers import dangerous creatures from around the world, sell them to buyers who have no idea what they are getting into, and then wash their hands of the consequences when those animals are released into the wild. There are no penalties severe enough to deter this behavior, no enforcement mechanisms capable of stopping it. The system is broken, and the environment pays the price. The cruelty of this situation goes deeper than the pet trade, alone. We spent decades destroying the habitat that native crocodiles depend on. We bulldozed their nesting grounds for real estate development. We poisoned their water with agricultural runoff. We pushed them into ever smaller fragments of their historic range, weakening their populations and making them vulnerable. And then, after doing everything possible to undermine their survival, we dropped a super predator into their midst. We broke their defenses and then introduced the very thing that could finish them off. The Nile crocodile is not the monster in this story. We created the conditions for this invasion. We opened the door and invited the killer inside. The price we pay. If the Nile crocodile becomes permanently established in Florida, the consequences will ripple far beyond the ecological damage. The Everglades are not just a swamp, they are an economy, a culture, and a worldwide icon. Florida depends heavily on ecotourism. Visitors come from every corner of the globe to kayak the mangroves, fish the labyrinthine backwaters, and witness the unique wildlife that defines this extraordinary ecosystem. That industry generates billions of dollars each year and supports thousands of jobs. But the arrival of a predator capable of hunting humans could instantly shatter that perception. Headlines would no longer read about the beauty of the Everglades. They would warn that it is a place where danger lurks in every canal, every marsh, every hidden waterway. The fragile trust visitors place in Florida's wilderness could collapse overnight, along with the livelihoods that depend on it. The financial burden of managing this invasion would be staggering. The state could be forced to fund permanent eradication programs, hiring teams of specialists to track, monitor, and hunt these crocodiles indefinitely. Advanced surveillance systems would need to be installed throughout the waterways. Safety protocols would have to be rewritten for every national park, recreation area, and public access point. Tens of millions of dollars could vanish each year, money that might otherwise protect native species, restore wetlands, or fund environmental education. Every dollar spent fighting a crisis caused by human negligence is a dollar taken from the work of preventing the next one. And then there is the darkest, most uncomfortable part of the solution. These are apex predators, magnificent creatures shaped by millions of years of evolution. They did nothing to deserve their fate. Florida officials cannot capture them and send them back to Africa. They cannot negotiate with instinct. To protect human life, they will have to engage in permanent eradication, hunting and killing a species simply for existing where it should never have been. The crocodiles will pay the ultimate price for human recklessness. Every bullet, trap, or snare will be a reminder that the real predator was not in the swamp. It was the carelessness and arrogance that allowed a foreign species to invade. Florida stands at a crossroads. The Everglades could survive, but only if we act with foresight, discipline, and humility. The fate of the crocodiles, the ecosystem, and the economy are intertwined. This is not just a story about an invasive species. It is a story about human hubris, the limits of control, and the high price of mistakes that were avoidable. And as the Nile crocodiles continue to spread silently through the waters, one haunting question remains. Can we fix what we broke before it's too late, or will the swamp itself become the proof of our failure? The Nile crocodiles are not just another invasive species. They are a mirror reflecting our own mistakes. Every displaced predator, every poisoned waterway, every ecosystem pushed to the brink is a consequence of choices we made without understanding the cost. And now, the swamps themselves are changing, rewriting the rules of life in the Everglades. If these crocodiles establish a self-sustaining population, we will no longer be observers. We will be neighbors to a predator that sees us as potential prey. The question is no longer how to undo the damage we've done. The question is whether we can learn fast enough, act wisely enough, before the next crisis arrives. The invasion is ongoing, the consequences are unfolding, and the true story of Florida's wild places is far from over. What will we do when nature takes its revenge? And will we even recognize it when it does? The question is no longer whether we can fix it, but whether we can survive long enough to try.